Welcome to MyBottleShop.com, online liquor superstore. Today we're going to do a review of Lark Whiskey. Lark is a Tasmanian whiskey, and there's a bit of a backstory about Lark and how it started up as Australia's first legal distillery over 150 years. Back after this. Okay, the story about Lark is it's one that's probably, if you know anything about the Lark Distillery, you've probably heard this story. And the story goes like this: up until about 1830, 1840, in Tasmania, there were 150 different distilleries on the island, and some of them were legal, and some of them were, what you could effectively call moonshiners. Now, the wife of the Tasmanian governor was a teetotaler, and she didn't like the effect that drinking whiskey had on the population of Tasmania, so she encouraged her husband to actually effectively shut down the whiskey industry in Tasmania. So in about the 1830s, whiskey distilling in Tasmania was made illegal. The story wind forward 150 years to the early 1990s, and Bill Lark, the founder of Lark Whiskey, was fly fishing up in the Tasmanian highlands with his father-in-law. And I think the idea is, for anybody who's been to Tasmania, there is some similarities between Tasmania and Scotland. And the pair were there fishing, fly fishing. One that they were sharing a Scottish whiskey. And Bill Lark said to his father-in-law, "Well, look, why don't we make whiskey here in Tasmania? It's a similar climate to Scotland. We have great water with these beautiful running rivers and creeks. We have natural barley growing on the island. We have peat bogs. So we have all the necessary ingredients in Tasmania to make great Australian whiskey." Bill went away to apply for a liquor license or distilling license, and found that in fact it was a very archaic, complicated process. First of all, he had to lobby the Tasmanian government to make it legal to distill whiskey in Tasmania, which he did. Took some years to get the stills set up and operational, and then of course you have to lay down the whiskey inside the casks. It's fair to say that probably Lark has been through a bit of a tumultuous history over the last 20-25 years, and there's been a lot of iterations of both the distillery, the operations, and the whiskey itself. I think, if you asked anybody about Lark whiskey, they would always say, Bill Lark knew what he was doing, and the whiskey that he made was amazing. But some of the processes and the operations there needed updating. And in fact, if you've been to the Coal Valley operations there in Tasmania, where some of this whiskey is made, up until very recently, this whiskey was made basically in the shed. So like a lot of Australian small micro producers, they operate off very small copper pot stills, and in Lark's case they have at least a couple at Coal Valley. They also have another distillery operation, and you'll see, if you look at each of the bottles here, you'll see, for example, this limited edition release, Wolf Release 3, this comes from the Bothwell Distillery, which is the old Nant distillery. And when you look at some of these other whiskies, like this is another limited edition whiskey, the Oloroso, that is from the Coal Valley Distillery. So bear that in mind when we look at the Lark whiskies, that they do come from different distilleries. And one of the whiskies we'll look at here, we're going to do a tasting, is the Lark Symphony, which is Lark's first blended malt whiskey, and that will be a blend of the different distilleries. Back in a minute. Okay, the Lark Symphony, number one, the reason why they released this Symphony blended malt is really price entry point. So in Australia, this retails for about $140, whereas you'll see some of the other, single malts that come out, the cask strength, the classic cask, you're talking in the range of $130 to up to $250, and even some of these limited edition bottles, they're $300 a bottle. So you're not cracking open a bottle of Lark Oloroso limited edition every night of the week, but you could conceivably have a dram of Symphony number 1. Now, the story behind this one is that this is a combination of American oak, so American oak barrels, sherry barrels, and port barrels. So there'd probably be a combination, maybe 2 to 3 different whiskies here, and this whiskey would come from a combination of Coal Valley and also the Bothwell Distillery as well. Now what we'll do is we're just going to have a little bit of taste of this symphony here to give some feedback on what it actually tastes like. Now I could tell straight away when I poured that out of the glass. As soon as I opened the cork, I got that fruity note. And the thing I would say about this whiskey, it's fruit. So you open up, it's almost like a tin of fruit. And I'm guessing there again on the palate, it's peaches, banana, lots of fruit, even probably hints of pineapple in there, maybe even mango. It's a very fruity whiskey. This one is bottled, it's a 500ml bottle, and it's 40.2%, so a little bit lower in ABV than the classic cask and obviously the cask strength. I still think it's got a nice warm burn or follow through on the palate. I get some citrus notes in there as well, just on the finish, with maybe a little bit of white pepper. So that's the Symphony blended malt. Remember, that's a blend of different malt whiskies. Okay, so now what we're going to do is just touch on Lark. Probably towards the mid 2020s, they started producing a range of limited edition whiskies. And the exciting thing about these limited edition whiskies is that you can almost say they were experimental in the process of making the whiskey, how it's barreled. So for example, they've got a Christmas cask whiskey here that was released in 2020 for Christmas. You know, that's quite a fruity type whiskey. An example of one of the limited edition releases was this Wolf Release 3, which was released in 2020, and that is a collaboration with the brewery Wolf of the Willows. And what the Wolf of the Willows did is they sent up some barrels filled with the Wolf's Imperial Johnny Smoke stout that was left to season in the oak barrels. The cask worked their magic on the beer before being decanted and returned to Lark to finish a single malt whiskey. So you can effectively say that this particular release was finished in the Wolf of the Willow beer barrels with the beer seasoning. There's a couple of others that have come out. The Oloroso cask, recently it was a Musk, and most recently it was a Canodo. What we're going to look at just today is the Oloroso cask release. And it comes in, like most Lark whiskies, it comes in the 500ml bottle and the 100ml bottle. So if you don't want to stump up for the whole value of the big bottle, you can buy one of these little bottles, great flask size bottle as well. Now, the important thing about this Oloroso cask, I must say, is that it's not Oloroso sherry cask. You might say it's Oloroso style, because in the early days of Australian winemaking, there was a lot of sherries that were made. They were made in different styles to mimic the Spanish sherry style, and one of those was Oloroso. So in this particular case, these barrels would have come from Seppelfield, and at one stage they would have held Australian sherry, and it would have been a sweeter style like Oloroso. Now let's have a look at this colour here. I've poured this out in a Lark Glencairn glass. I'd say colour-wise, are quite a dark golden colour. Let's pick that up from the Seppelfield cask. These casks are probably, they could be 60, 80, 100 years old even, and maybe have had sherry go through them multiple different times before Lark gets their hands on them and fills them up with whiskey. So just reading off the notes here, there's a little bit of obviously the sherry style. There's also port finish on this as well as the sherry, so you're getting a double dose of sweetness. Look, on the nose, I do get, I suppose, bakery notes. It's early morning in the bakery notes. It's quite a sweet note, slight notes of creme brulee, a little bit of fruit. There is the hint of peat on there, hint of smoke, I would say. And when I first tasted this, I went away and found out, why am I getting that hint of smoke? Well, actually, one of the port barrels that was used in this whiskey was a lightly peated barrel, and just the whiskey, this Oloroso whiskey, has just that hint of that puff of that smoke on the whiskey. So you get the sweet notes of the Oloroso sherry with just a hint of smoke. So it's a beautiful whiskey. It's a 500ml bottle, and it is 47% ABV, which seems to be the norm for the limited edition releases. They seem to be around that sort of high 40%. Unfortunately, this whiskey is sold out. They made about 1,400 bottles and it was gone in a flash. I'd say again on the finish, that it's got a very long, warm finish. A little bit of that peat smoke, as I mentioned, a little bit of hint of pepper on the finish there as well. It really is a beautiful whiskey, and it's no wonder that it's sold out. And what I would say to anybody that's interested in getting these whiskies is, you get on the mailing list, and as soon as you're notified about the whiskey, if it's one you're interested in, jump on it, because the way they're releasing these, they're selling out straight away. One last point I want to make mention, Lark has changed their packaging a few times. Last year it was this sort of brown style box, and most recently with the limited edition releases and their core range, they've released this beautiful presentation box as well, so it makes a great gift as well. Alright, well that's the rundown on Lark Distillery. If there's any comments or any extra information that you want to post, please post in the comments down below, and we'll reply to all of the comments. And also, if you like the content, please subscribe to the channel. For now, Steve here from MyBottleShop.com, over and out.